Is anybody talking? I mean, are we gonna get started or what?
I didn't unmute. Now, I'm sorry. Now you're. Do you hear us now?
Yep.
Okay, again, we've got what's on the agenda at this point are the minutes from the March 3, 2020 meeting. Any comments, corrections?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Scott,
Support.
supported by Tyler to approve the minutes. On this, we'll go by acclamation. If there's anyone that is not in favor of that motion, please indicate aye. We'll consider the minutes approved. Next item on the agenda are opportunity for general public comment. This is an effort to address items that perhaps are not on the agenda this evening. So if anyone that wishes to offer comment, if you're in the audience and in person, please come to the podium. Otherwise, if you're out in the general public viewing this, please raise your virtual hand on the computer screen. Jason, do we have any takers?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. We'll move along to the first project review agenda item. This is a public hearing for proposed amendment to the Northridge East IPUD preliminary area site plan, relocation of South Industrial Drive, combining lots 9 and 10. Tricia Anderson, Planning Director, if you could introduce this project, please.
Jason, I need to share my screen.
Yeah.
And I don't know why this is always an issue for me.
No.
So we have folks from Visser Brothers. We've got Greg Bowl and Heath Baxter of Visser Brothers joining us tonight to request an amendment to the PASP for the Northridge East IPUD. Previous amendments to this IPUD were related to the Amazon site that went in and they proposed to change the phasing. And so before the subject parcel that we're talking about tonight, which is lots 9 and 10 per the current plan, that was before the last amendment, that was part of phase 3. So they switched the phasing around to have the Amazon site as phase 1, and they broke it down into only 2 phases. So phase 2 now is everything south of the railroad tracks. And I am going to try to share my screen so I can show some plans up here. All right, let me try this again. There we go. Okay. So in this graphic here, you can see the whole PUD, and phase 2, as you'll see, is below or south of the railroad tracks. So another thing that they are proposing to do on top of combining lots 9 and 10 for one large development, they've had interest from a single party who wants all of that acreage for a significant industrial development. And so because there's only one occupant that they are proposing to have on this acreage, it didn't make a ton of sense for them to extend the road all the way to the westernmost border of the parcel. And so because of that, for the time being, staff is in support of building this road in the way that it's been shown. They have to cross the railroad tracks, and there's a little bit of, they have to work with the Coopersville Marne Railway to comply with their standards with MDOT rail safety. But in terms of this road right here, ending here, we're okay with that as long as we can have them dedicate some public road right of way to the end of this parcel. Because while these parcels that are to the west of there, while they look pretty challenging topography wise, there's still a small chance that they could be developed. And so we have a responsibility to provide public access to those parcels if they ever do get developed. I don't think I added the graphic in here, but in my staff report, I provided a couple images that show what the connectivity, the mobility plan looked like in the 1998 master plan. And at one time, it made sense for Baxter Drive to connect to Northridge Drive. But in the way that things played out, and then the precise plat came into play, and it no longer makes sense for Baxter Drive to extend, especially since those parcels in between the lot 9 and the end of Baxter Drive are pretty hilly, pretty challenging. And so the 2020 master plan shows Northridge Drive connecting to Fruitridge. And so that precise plat is getting really close to being fully built out. And this particular road configuration, we are in support of. There are some issues that, we had a lot of emails back and forth about the design of the road, and there's a 90-degree bend there, and the location of the driveway coming off to access the parking lot for the proposed building. And the biggest issue that came into play was snow removal, and will the DPW be able to get their guys through that little knee-shaped bend there? And so we've proposed that our attorney draft up a development agreement, and one of the things that will be contained within that agreement will be the property owner for lot 9 having to be responsible for some private snow removal to ensure that it doesn't get stored out in that little half cul-de-sac, whatever you want to call it. And so just a reminder that this is the PASP request, or the amendment request. And so once their occupant is ready to move forward with site plan approval, at that time we'll go through more of the in-depth review of the technical details of the site. So at this time, we're just asking, or the applicant is just asking for the amendment to combine the two lots and then for the configuration of the road. And so I'll just go through my recommendation here. So it's recommended that the Planning Commission grant the approval of the amendments to the Northridge East IPUD PASP per the plan set with a revision date of March 3rd, 2021, specifically to combine lots 9 and to relocate South Industrial Drive, subject to the following conditions. So number 1, as part of FASP review process, the developer and occupant of lot 9 shall enter into a development agreement with the city of Walker that would hold the developer responsible for private snow removal and storage outside of the public right of way and for repairs to any portion of South Industrial Drive that becomes damaged during the construction process. And the developer shall address all the items outlined in the city engineer's report dated 3/11/2021. I should also mention that there's a big piece here that I forgot to mention. They would like to request concurrent development of the site during the construction of the road. And typically this is out of the order of operations. But again, this development agreement that I mentioned would cover responsibility that the developer has in repairing any damages to the road. They have kind of limited access to get in and out of that site, and they have to cross over the railroad tracks. And it's at the end of the cul-de-sac, or the temporary cul-de-sac of South Industrial Drive where it ends now. They tried to get access through the Grand Rapids Press property and to no avail. So we'd like to be able to work with them because the occupant that they have in the hopper could be a potential for several jobs here in the city of Walker. And as usual, that's pretty important to us.
Right. Thank you, Tricia. Commissioners, any comments or questions on that introduction thus far? Not only in the building here, but also we have several of our commissioners taking part virtually. Seeing none, we'll turn this over to Scott Connors, the city engineer.
So as Tricia said, the big change here is really related to the road, and because this is a PASP and it's just our first look at it, we don't have a lot of detailed comments for you. But I think, one thing to point out is, the change in the road is really necessitated by the desire to put one user back there with one larger lot, and that really squeezes what was going to be a road that would bisect that property and puts it up against the railroad. And I think at first we had some concerns about that. We did check in, wanted to do our homework, so we checked in with the railroad, with MDOT and local staff, and kind of talked about the angle. And with some safety precautions that Frank can put into the development agreement, we're comfortable that we can approve this. I don't want to, that this isn't the most desirable approach with a 90-degree bend, but when you look at the development of the site, I think what the city's looking for here, we can find a way to work around that with some safety precautions in terms of clear vision, extra signings, and things like that. So that's really, I think, the box check for me tonight is that that's feasible. We think we can work through that. We will be working with Tom a little bit as he's working with the railroad, so we'll have a little conflict there, but we'll figure our way through that. Sanitary sewer and water main, the site will still, the south of the tracks will still be served by public sewer and water. There may be the need for that sewer and water to extend all the way to the west property line. We're still working through that with Grand Rapids, but typically they would want it to be fully developed when that happens. So I think the developer is aware of that, but we have to work through that process. That's really it, other than, one comment that as we try to work with folks and help accelerate some of these projects, we're encouraging them to turn in the detailed road utility plans early on so that we can maybe do some of these things concurrently. If we can get through the reviews and the permitting for the road, they can get started a little bit early, they can put themselves at an advantage when it comes time to start putting in foundations and walls and trusses on the building, because we want to do everything we can to minimize the friction between those two sources, so that if a guy's coming in with a load of steel trusses, for example, they're not driving over an under drain or a water main that was just built, and it doesn't have the necessary cover and things like that. So whatever we can do to move this road part along quicker, we want to try and do that.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Any questions for city engineer? Jason?
Mr. Chair, two questions on that. With the road being short of the property line, who then bears the cost of the extension, if it does develop to the next two pieces of property? And then, you know, do we have any concerns about what that might look like in terms of length of road being a dead end road, getting it all the way out there? And I guess those were both kind of towards Scott.
In terms of the dead end, that's probably a reasonable length for a dead end, especially knowing that there's properties to the west that could serve in the future, because we don't want them to be landlocked. In terms of extending the road to the west property line, I think Frank has some ideas on how to craft that into the development agreement. So we're kind of hands off a little bit on that, because I think that's something he'll work out with Visser Brothers.
Any other questions? Before we open this up for a public hearing, I'd like to have the developer come forward and offer any comments you may wish to share.
Good evening, I'm Greg Ball with Visser Development. As usual, staff has done a great job explaining what we're trying to accomplish here. You know, when we lay these PUDs out at the very start, we do our best to crystal balling what we think will happen based on our experience in this development field. Ultimately, we have some changes, just like we did with the Amazon site. This too is a little bit of change, but we were fortunate enough to meet Speederack Products, which is the company that we're working with. Introduce Eric Quist, the president, in a minute. We can just give you a little background on the company, but we're fortunate enough to meet them. This is a great opportunity, not only for them, for us, but the city, new jobs, good manufacturing jobs. So we think it's a good fit for all of us. And we appreciate the fact that, you know, staff's willing to make a few exceptions to this project, because we did try to work with the press to get access. They won't respond, they won't return calls, they won't return emails. So we're kind of stuck there. So that's really all I have, unless you have questions. And Heath Baxter's here too, we can answer questions. But Eric Quist with Speederack Products Group, the president, he'll just give you a little background on the company, and then we're available for questions.
Thanks, Greg. Just a brief background on our company. So we build storage racking for very large customers like Amazon. We didn't do anything in this current development with Amazon because that's a smaller type big facility. We did the big one out by the airport. We do them all over the country. We do them for GM, Ford, Gap, a lot of PIC modules for e-commerce. We started the company out of Quincy, Illinois, many, many years ago. We've been in business since the 70s. And we moved plants out of Alabama and West Virginia into Quincy, Michigan about 20 years ago. And that's when I came on board the company. So we have like 500,000 square foot down there now, going on 600,000 square foot down in Quincy, Michigan, that we just did a big addition to that facility. And we also put a satellite plant in Litchfield, Michigan about 3 years ago. So, you know, we're really happy. Thank you for having me on. We're really happy to be here. We were targeting Northeast Indiana at first, but we decided this is really where we wanted to be. We feel that we can get the workforce we need here, and our owners here in this area, in the Grand Rapids area, and as well as our corporate offices in Sparta. I think most of that is going to move over here. We're still going to have some offices over in Sparta, but we are going to put offices in with this facility. So right now we're planning like shy of 300,000 square foot with office and manufacturing. It'll be high-paying union jobs, hopefully, you know, because it's a right-to-work state. But our current facilities are under contract with the unions. The Millwright unions out of Warren, Michigan, and they have a facility down there in Wayland off 131, the training center. And that's who will help us recruit people. So they'll help us recruit robotics people and welding people and train them and bring them in. So again, you know, for us, time is of the essence because we already have orders on books for both Ford and a lot for Amazon for 2021 and 2022. So the first phase of this is get through like 300,000 square foot, and by 2023, hopefully be breaking ground at another 300,000 square foot for phase 2. So Again, those will be robotic jobs, welding jobs, there'll be general laborers, be about 150 personnel we plan to hire on 2 shifts. And at least a dozen management positions within that facility. Then I think we're bringing like 40 more over from Sparta to house them there in the new offices that we plan to build there. That's all I have. Any questions for me? Oh, thanks again.
All right, thank you. This is a public hearing, so entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion. Open the public hearing.
Support. Motion by Tyler, supported by Scott to open the public hearing. Again, anyone in opposition to that, please say aye. We will open the public hearing. We'll take comments again from the audience here in person, as well as over the airwaves.
If you're on the phone, *9 to raise your hand, *6 to unmute. I'm not seeing any hands.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Support. Motion by Tyler, supported by Scott to close the public hearing. Again, anyone in opposition to that, please say aye. Okay, we'll move forward. I do have one question for the applicant. There's some discussion from both the planning director and the city engineer about some development agreement and the provisions associated with that. Do you understand it, and are you accepting of that?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Heath of Baxter Brothers and DET Development. We've paid the fees to the city. We had the city attorney draft the development agreement. One of the requirements Frank Wash had for PASP approval was a draft agreement. We're working towards that. We recently got the memo from Tom Bio on his requirements. They have to be inserted into that for the railroad. So we're kind of waiting on the city attorney to get us a rough draft, and we'll start going through that. But I don't see the reason why you have anything that would stand in our way.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion, case number 21-007, motion for preliminary site plan amendment, relocation of South Industrial Drive and combination of lots 9 and 10, IPUD. I make a motion to propose amendments to the Northridge East IPUD preliminary area site plan based on the site plan set last revision dated 3/3/2021. Conditions of phase 2 final area site plan approval. Developer agrees to all conditions noted in the planning director staff report dated 3/8/2021, except as modified by the planning commission. Number 2, developer agrees to all conditions noted in the city engineer staff report dated 3/11/2021. Findings of fact for section 94-213-3G. The PSP amendments for the relocation of South Industrial Drive and the combination of lots 9 and 10, phase 2 of the Northridge East IPUD. The proposed development conforms to the city's master plan. The proposed development conforms to the intent and to all regulations and standards of the Walker zoning ordinance as applicable. The proposed development will be adequately served by the public facilities and services such as highways, streets, police, and fire protection, drainage courses, water and sanitary sewer facilities, refuse disposal, or that the persons or agencies responsible for the proposed development shall be able to provide in a manner acceptable to the planning commission any such facilities and services. The location of the proposed uses, layout of the site, and its relation to streets giving access to it shall be such that traffic to, from, and within the site and assembly of persons in connection therewith will not be hazardous or inconvenient to the project or the surrounding area. In applying this standard, the planning commission shall consider, among other things, convenient routes for pedestrian traffic, particularly of children, relationship to the proposed project to main thoroughfares and street intersections, and the general character and intensity of the existing and potential development of the surrounding areas. Streets will follow topography be properly spaced and be located on line in accordance with the intended function of each street. The project will have adequate access to public streets. The plans do provide for logical extensions of public streets and do provide suitable street connections to adjacent parcels where applicable.
Do we have support for this motion?
Or,
Support by Joe Taylor. What we have before us then is action to approve consistent with this motion. And Tricia, if you could call a roll call, please.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
yeah, Tom Bile here. I'm going to abstain from voting. Have been advising the railroad on the crossing issues, so I don't think it's a conflict of interest, but I'll abstain.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, so Gary,
Yes.
Tyler,
Yes.
Steve, Jason,
yes,
Pat,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes with one abstention. And project is approved. Again, this is a preliminary site plan. Continue working with staff, working towards the final area plan. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda. This is site plan review for industrial building at Fruitridge and 4 Mile, being submitted by Bruggink on behalf of the applicants. Tricia, again, if you could provide us with an introduction.
Okay, so this project is for a 285,000 square foot multi-tenant industrial building and related site improvements. And the planning commission is being asked to grant approval with conditions or tabling of the request. So this is a site plan review located at 3251 Fruitridge Avenue. And this piece of property that is the subject tonight has a future address of 3501 Fruitridge Avenue. So the lot size of the piece that will be split from the parent parcel is 17.65 acres. It has a zoning of light industrial, and the future land use is business and enterprise in the northwest neighborhood cluster. And this project is located on the northwest corner of 4 Mile Road and Fruitridge Avenue, and it's just north of the Irwin seating site. And tonight we have Justin Longstreth of Bruggink, who is representing the applicant, Honeycrisp Ventures, and the owner, Graham Irwin. So this map you see here on the screen is the portion of the Irwin seating site, the green dashed line, which is the entire site. So just this portion is being proposed for the site plan approval for the industrial building. And we held a site plan review committee meeting with the folks from Acme Marine, who will be the first occupant in this multi-occupant or multi-tenant building, and with Justin. And the revised plans that they provided to us before they went out to the planning commission addressed most of our concerns. We just have a couple of issues that we want to still see if we can get worked out. So here's the site plan right here. You'll see that there is 6 spaces proposed for this building. They're proposing a shared access from this drive approach that accesses the Irwin seating site. And they have shared or a cross-access agreement that they will be recording. And we've asked that they provide a copy of that to us as a condition of approval. So they are bordering, they have, there's an agricultural parcel here, and we have agricultural residentially zoned property over here in Alpine Township on the north side of 4 Mile Road. And then we also have some residential land uses on the east side of Fruitridge Avenue. And so some of the things that we would like them to pay a little bit closer attention to is the lighting and the landscaping. And so in terms of the lighting, the applicant provided us with all of the lighting fixture specifications and a photometric plan. But we would like for the photometric plan to not exceed 0-foot candles from the future parking area and beyond to the east. I'm sorry, to the west. And so I think it would be appropriate to keep that that trailer, future trailer parking area lit when that thing comes into fruition. But I don't see the need to extend the illumination of the site any further than that. So it's recommended that the applicant revise the photometric plan to reflect this as a condition of approval. In terms of landscaping, there is a really nice buffer of trees that's situated between the two parcels, and it's on the western edge of the subject parcel. I'm not completely sure if those patches of woods are on the neighboring property or if it's on the subject property. So I know that there's going to be a lot of grading sort of right up to the property line, but any trees that could be preserved in that area would be beneficial for the buffering perspective. And this is also a site that sometimes you don't know what kind of plantings are going to be needed until the time comes where the building's built. It's almost time for occupancy. It's that time of year where you got to get the plantings in so that you don't have to wait until the next season. And so this is a good site where I feel it would be appropriate to have the applicant work with staff for any changes that are proposed to the landscape plan after tonight's approval. And I'll show that picture. So Justin can probably speak to how much of this is on the subject parcel and how much is hopefully on the neighboring parcel, but this seems to be a good buffer that if it could stay, the number of plantings that would have to go in on this side could easily be reduced. And there's a bit of a berm here. So we lose some elevation right here. And I think originally they planned on adding a whole bunch of like boulders and some really nice expensive stuff. So if any of that changes, then we're asking that they can work with staff to submit an acceptable landscaping plan that meets the needs for this site. And then the last piece that I have is I'll just go through the recommendations, which I apparently don't have in my presentation here. So it is recommended that the Planning Commission grant site plan approval for the 285,000 square foot multi-tenant industrial building for Acme Marine at the future address of 3501 Fruitridge Avenue Northwest per per the plan set with the last revision date of March 3rd, 2021, subject to the following conditions. The developer shall address the items outlined in the city engineer's report dated 3/11/2021, which he'll go through in just a second here. The applicant shall revise the landscaping plan to include planting calculations for review and approval by staff prior to the issuance of a building permit. The applicant shall revise the photometric plan to reduce the light levels within the 20-foot buffer zone along the western property line to 0-foot candles prior to the issuance of a building permit. The applicant shall provide a recorded copy of the 40-foot wide access easement for ingress egress prior to the issuance of occupancy. And one last issue, they are proposing 139 parking spaces where 148 parking spaces is required. But they do have 24 future parking spaces. So if the planning commission decides that the proposed parking is acceptable for the one occupant that will be in the building before the rest of it gets built out, then they can modify that condition. So I spoke with Justin about this, and he said it's just a matter of they don't know who's going to be occupying the building, but they want to have some parking spaces deferred or marked as future, so that if the need arises where they do need additional parking, they've already got it approved in a plan. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Tricia. Thank you, Tricia. And again, from the commission, any comments or questions for Tricia on this? All right, seeing none, we'll turn this over to the engineer, Scott Connors.
So being that this is a site plan review, you guys only get one shot at this, so my comments are a little bit more detailed. I'll try to go over them quick, but bear with me. We are going to need a little bit more information on the existing storm sewer that's in the street there at the southeast corner that does drain through this site. So we want to make sure we have all the sizes appropriate, make sure that design is worthy there. The sidewalk should be located, the back of the walk should be 49 feet from the center line of the road. You'll notice there's some really goofy right of way out here, and it doesn't look consistent. The road kind of curves to the east. I think when that was lined up decades ago, the right of way was never really cleaned up, and that's okay. But we don't want to penalize them by having that sidewalk pushed too far back. So we're letting them kind of wrap the sidewalk with the road so that you've got that 49 feet, which mimics our commercial industrial road. The way they've got it shown now, that'll give them about 5 extra feet for that landscaping berm. I think that'll make a big difference in making that fit and making those slopes a little bit safer. The open cut in Fruitridge that's shown for water main, we want to make sure there's dimensions on there in advance. If you notice when the DTE site went in on 3 Mile Road, they had some open cuts. You can drive by those now. You can see that the seam for those open cuts is right in the middle of the lane. That's really what we want to try to avoid. We want to get those things on the lane lines, so there's no tire track over those. They last a little bit longer, and that's part of asking for that detailed information on the plans. The driveway to the north part of the site is all going to be under the jurisdiction of the Kent County Road Commission as it goes out to 4 Mile Road. So all the geometrics, the radius, the width, all that kind of stuff is going to have to meet their standards. So we will defer to them. We're asking for a few more storm inverts on sheet 4 of 11. That helps to kind of bring that all together, because drainage is always a big concern with these projects. We want to make sure we've got all the information there that we need. And then related to drainage, the future trailer parking spots, I think the way they're shown now, they kind of sheet flow to the west towards the Virginia Fish property, which is the farm to the west. We want to make sure that that's tipped the other way. We want to make sure that they're tipped back onto the site, so they go through the detention system, so the water goes through the storm sewer and is taken care of and outletted safely. That's a really easy fix. And then lastly, just to remind you that we will have a stormwater permit for this project, so we'll get a chance to review all the details of stormwater later, if that helps put you at ease tonight.
Thank you, Scott. And commissioners, questions, comments for Scott's presentation? Seeing none. The applicant, Justin, if you come forward, please, and introduce your presentation.
Sure. Justin Longstreth with Bruggink. It's great to be in person with you guys tonight. So yeah, staff did a great job introducing the project. So I don't know that I have a lot to add, but maybe I can just talk to a couple of the things that were mentioned. One being the landscaping on the west property line. That current stand of trees is about half and half on our property and half on the other. We certainly can work with staff to adjust grading as much as we can to keep as many of those, but I'm going to guess about half of them will stay just by virtue of them being on a neighbor's property. And then as far as the parking is concerned, we don't feel at this point that our potential tenants, although we don't know who they are, we know the nature of what they are as far as what they do, likely a lot of warehousing and logistics. We don't feel like we need all of that parking, but we certainly want to prove to city staff and the planning commission that we have the ability to build that if ever in the future we need to. So that's why we have the reserved parking spaces. And would like to just point out, we do have a letter of intent with Acme Marine. They will hopefully be the first tenant in this. I know Ben and the team are going to certainly work real hard to fill the rest of the space up. So if there's any specific questions, I'll gladly answer those.
Thank you, Justin. Any questions?
Does this site go all the way to Irwin Seating? They have a big parking lot there north of the plant.
Yeah, so our building does not extend all the way to their parking lot. We do have maybe 150 feet or so between our south driveway and their driveway. So it does not extend all the way.
You go out there and you look at that, that's larger than 17 acres, isn't it? That's a big piece of the earth right there when I drive by that.
I think where we're cutting off that south property line, it's about 17, but you're right, it is a big piece, but we've got a 285,000 square foot building too, so it's a fairly big building.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other comments or questions, thank you, Justin. This is not a public hearing, but if there's someone here to offer comment on this project, please indicate so either in person here or by the computer.
Mr. Chair, I think it's important that we note that Virginia Fish did send a letter to the planning commission, and she's not opposing this. She's mostly concerned about the handling of the water. So I think that needs to be in the record.
Thank you.
She does mention noise level too, so there's a couple things.
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay. All right. So no comment to be added to that. We're up for discussion amongst us commissioners on direction to take. We have a model motion before us outlining the items identified by the planning director and the city engineer.
Just one comment. I don't have a problem with 139 parking sites. That's 9 short of what they're required, and they have plenty of extra parking plans. So just to be on the record for that.
I tend to agree with deferring the parking if they don't have an immediate need and showing that they have that ability. Favor that as well. Do I have anyone wishing to offer a motion on this?
There's one person that wants to talk now for the public.
Okay. Jeremy,
Yes.
you may proceed.
Yeah, I'm just worried about the traffic on the 4 mile right there because I'm a resident in the Winding Stream right there subdivision, and right now like the traffic would be pretty bad at Fruitridge and 4 mile. Is that where all the trucks are going to be coming out there? Or are they going to go through the drive-through Irwin Seating side right there? Where would be most of the traffic coming out in and out of?
Scott, in terms of truck routes?
I defer to Justin.
Justin?
It's tough to know for sure. Both routes, both to the south and north of 4 Mile are going to be designed to accommodate larger trucks. So they could very easily go either way. So I would say maybe 50-50 would be best guess at this point.
Also, I believe the intersection, the driveway for Irwin seating, that's going to be a signalized intersection at Northridge.
That's our understanding as well later this year.
So that may have a bearing, especially if they're large trucks, if you get a signalized intersection, accessing, in this case, if they're going to the expressway, that would be a logical location, route to take.
Absolutely.
Right, but wouldn't you want to put a no truck entrance on 4 Mile though, to keep traffic down on that area? Like no truck entrance or right there?
Well, I think 4 Mile's under the jurisdiction of the Kent County Road Commission. And they would have jurisdiction on whether or not it would allow for trucks. Scott and maybe even Tom, do you know whether that is a designated truck route, all season road?
4 Mile, it's weight restricted in the spring, but trucks can use it now if they weight restrict, and they can use it all the rest of the year. We have no restrictions on the county system.
So Tom, I don't think you guys have a real truck route per se, correct?
That is correct. We do not have a truck route system. Everything is open to all the trucks.
Thank you, Jeremy. Joanne, you have the floor.
Hi, I was wondering if they would have to make a portion of 4 Mile 4 lanes if they have trucks coming out onto 4 Mile.
Hey, Scott, do you know if there's any shorter long range plans to expand the 4 Mile roadway?
I have not heard of any for anything west of Fruitridge, but again, that decision would be a road commission decision, and we kind of deferred to their wishes in terms of what I call geometrics, the shape of the road, the shape of the driveway, location of the driveway, all that kind of stuff. It's in their purview.
Engineering, the road commission engineering staff will review that, and if it needs to be an additional bypass lane or something, the developer will have to provide it.
Thank you, Tom.
Also, Meg would like to talk. Meg, there's one more person I'd like to talk.
Okay.
On the public.
Yes.
Yes, Meg.
Hey, this is Shane Duba. Thanks. So I also live in the Winding Stream development. I got a couple questions. Number one, just wondered about the initial plan tenant, Acme Marine. If you could talk a little bit more detail, if you know it, about their planned operations, what are they going to be doing in the facility, anything like that. And secondly, I'm just wondering if there's been or any more information on the water analysis for the parcel for this planned development. Basically, if and how it'll be changing the drainage in that area. You talked a little bit about some of the drainage on site into storm water. I guess I'm wondering, is it going to be changing any of the water drainage, particularly to the west, towards the creek to the west and towards our development at all? There's the creek there and there's some wetlands there. So just wonder if you could talk about those two things a little bit more. Thank you.
Sure, I can talk about the stormwater, and then I'll invite Wes from Acme Marine maybe to come up and answer any questions related to their operation. But as far as the stormwater design goes, we're going to have a stormwater detention basin on site. All of the stormwater will be collected in catch basins, conveyed to the basin through storm pipe, and then have a restricted outlet that meets City of Walker stormwater ordinances. So the water currently runs, if you drive by the site, it is high on the Fruitridge side, and it does slope off to the west, so the water does currently go that way now. Our intent with design is just to make sure that we don't change the rate by which that water leaves the site after our development's done. So we certainly will adhere to the ordinance standards and make sure that we're doing that the right way. And there will be a permit application or a permit that we need to obtain from city staff before that's done anyway. So, but glad to invite Wes up and you can talk specifics about their operation.
Thank you, Dustin.
Thanks for letting us take some time with you tonight and hear about the plans for Walker. So we are a precision metal machining company that happens to be located in Michigan, and we're very proud of the state. Most of our employees are from the area, and we'd be very excited to continue to grow our business in the area. So today we manufacture precision metal components for the marine, military, and material handling industries. And we're very proud to be 100% US-based business. We do have a foundry here locally in Michigan as well. I can tell you we've been doing a lot of searching for the right place to grow our business inside and outside of the state. And we really hope that West Michigan is the place. Personally, for us, it's a place we want to grow and raise our families. And there's certainly a lot of manufacturing opportunities in Michigan that we want to encourage other industries here. So we're excited to be a part of the business or part of the business community here. And welcome to answer any other questions you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That answered my questions. Appreciate it.
I haven't seen any of.
Okay, that appears to be the extent of the public comment for this project. Commissioners, any comments or questions concerning the project?
For my part, I think it looks good to me. As long as the stormwater permit looks good from our engineering department, that'll be the biggest issue with the water in that area. I know can get a little bit, there's a lot of fluctuation with the creek and everything. So just making sure we're not causing any issues on adjacent property owners. I know we don't do a ton of industrial development directly adjacent to a residential home. So certainly being sensitive to that property owner to the west and all those downstream from them as well.
Thank you, Steve. Is there anyone ready to offer a motion on this?
I can do that.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Pat, you want to? No, I got it.
Okay.
All right. So for case 21-006, I will make a motion to approve the site plan set revision dated 3/3/2021 and supporting application material for a 285,000 square foot industrial building with 6 tenant suites with associated office space and related site improvements for Acme Marine / Honeycrisp Ventures at the property located at 3251 Fruitridge Avenue Northwest, future address of 3501 Fruitridge Avenue Northwest. Conditions of site plan approval: the developer shall address all the items outlined in the city engineer's report dated 3/11/2021.
Just a note, Steve. Sorry. Just a note, Steve. The Scott's memo was 310, not 311.
Got it. That is helpful. Okay. So it would be city engineer's report dated 3/10/2021. The applicant shall revise the landscaping to include planting calculations for review and approval by staff prior to the issuance of a building permit. The applicant shall revise the photometric plan to reduce light levels within the 20-foot buffer zone along the western property line to 0-foot candles prior to the issuance of a building permit. The applicant shall provide a recorded copy of the 40-foot wide access easement for ingress and egress prior to the issuance of occupancy. The planning commission must decide if the planned 24 future parking spaces can be offset the need to build all 148 parking spaces up front versus 139 as proposed. And we have elected to accept the 139 as proposed. Added condition, the applicant shall revise the note on the plans that indicates the last revision date to say planning commission instead of city commission.
You have a motion on the floor. Is there support?
Support. Pat.
Okay, motion by Steve, support by Pat to grant conditional approval to this project as described. Tricia, if you could please call the roll, please.
Jerry,
Yes.
Tyler,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Pat,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is request of Great Lakes Capital for preliminary area site plan review. And this involves property at the intersection of southeast quadrant of Hendershot and 4 Mile Road. Tricia, if you could introduce the project.
First, Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve of case 20-882 from the table.
Thank you. Got a motion to remove this project from the table, or support by Scott to remove it from the table. Anyone in opposition to that, please say aye. We'll move forward with the presentation. Thanks.
Okay, so, as you know, this item was tabled at the March 3rd meeting, for a number of reasons that I will get into. But first, just a quick refresher on the property and the request. So this time, we're only here to consider the PASP, as the Planning Commission forwarded a favorable recommendation to the City Commission for the rezone from AA to IPUD. And that rezone is planning to go on the City Commission agenda on April 12th. This property is located at 3174 4 Mile Road. The lot size is 16.15 acres. The zoning district is currently AA until the City Commission holds 2 readings of the rezoning for final approval. Future land use designation is business, and it's in the Northwest neighborhood cluster with a community character designation of enterprise. And this project is located just east of the proposed southern extension of Hendershot Road at 4 Mile. And we have Andrew Rossell of AR Engineering representing Arnold and Viola Grover, who are the property owners, and the prospective buyer, Jeff Smoke, who represents Great Lakes Capital. So there was enough information at the last meeting for the Planning Commission to provide a recommendation to the City Commission for the rezone, but there were some areas that still needed to be addressed from a PASP minimum requirement standpoint. And so, again, PASP is the overall PUD development plan. And this is the step in the process where we nail down certain things like uses that will be permitted within the PUD, uses that should be prohibited within the PUD, the treatment of the perimeter of the PUD, which is, the landscape buffer. And, we're looking at big picture items like access and site circulation and things like that. So just another overview of the surrounding land uses. Here's the subject site. This is It's directly east of where the Amazon site, which is under construction, is located. You've got a trucking company here. You've got several existing residential uses here, more residential uses on the north side of 4 Mile, Canada Hills High School up here. Then we have this water tower property. Then we have some industrial down on the southern border of the parcel. So at the last meeting, we talked about needing more information with traffic circulation. And we had asked the applicant to please provide truck turning templates. And those were provided, but it did not show a 360-degree maneuvering around the entire building like we had asked for. So that's one of the things that we're looking at tonight. I think it's manageable. Scott noted that the truck turning movements that were provided to us have to use the right of way in order to be able to maneuver into some of those truck docks. So we'd like to be able to work with the applicant to see if we can't figure out how to get trucks in and out without having to utilize the right of way to do that. As far as, I'll get to landscaping and screening in a second, but first I'd like to talk about land uses. And so we talked about land uses that should be prohibited at the last meeting, and that the Planning Commission has the discretion to prohibit any specific land uses. And in this particular case, you have some existing residential sort of all throughout the east side of the parcel and some on the north. And so we talked about a couple of uses. In my last report, I mentioned some specific uses that would not be appropriate on that site. And so in response to those comments and that discussion at the meeting, the applicant provided a note on the site plan that indicated restricted uses being kennel, 24-hour mini storage center, fuel filling station, recycling and compost center, and major auto repair. So after thinking about this for some time, in terms of the uses, it would be really hard for us to think about all the possible uses that could be acceptable in a light industrial or an industrial planned unit development. And so to make any use a possibility, I thought that it would be wise to have the applicant revise the plan to have the note saying that uses permitted would be ones that are permitted in the light industrial district, zoning district, subject to use review by the City of Walker Planning Commission at the discretion of the planning director. So if an occupant comes in and wants to occupy one of the spaces within the building, or wants to occupy the whole building, you know, usually the first question is, what's the use? And at that time, if it's kind of an iffy use and I get enough details to where it might be questionable whether or not it would be compatible with the surrounding residential, I would have the discretion to say, hey, let's have the planning commission take a look at this and decide whether or not this use would be a good fit on the site. And so I've recommended adding that note, and then also the performance standards that uses should comply with Article 15 for sound, vibration, odor, gases, glare, heat, light, electromagnetic radiation, smoke, dust, dirt, fly ash, drifted and blown material, and radioactive materials. So we don't have a use necessarily for this building yet because it's a spec building, but we do have a responsibility to be sensitive to the residential land uses to the east, especially since the master plan is keeping those residential areas as existing residential density. And so the next item that I want to expand on a little bit is the landscape buffer. And so in the first plan, it showed a berm. And so, you know, the question was, where are the details for this berm? Because they were referenced on the grading plan. But the grading plan didn't have any details. And so the revised plan showed the berm being taken out altogether. It's my recommendation that we keep a berm there to add buffer from any sounds, any noises, the view of the building. When you add landscaping to the top of the berm, it would provide a much better buffer than just the landscape plantings. And so the developer or the applicant also revised the plan to sort of beef up the number of plantings on the west side, which is great. Then down here, I think the rationale was that you know, there's no actual residential uses over here, no houses, nobody utilizing this property that's really going to care if they look at a building or a truck loading dock or hear any trucks. But there's quite a bit of acreage over here that you know, in this time and with the market being this hot and the inventory of residential single family homes being really low, there's potential for development here. And so just because there's no residential land uses there now doesn't mean that there won't be ever. And so it's important during the PASP step of the process to nail down our expectations for buffering and screening between incompatible land uses or potential incompatible land uses. So I'm also recommending that we keep the buffer or the berm, and that it be extended all the way to that south property line, and also require the type C buffer just as the northern portion of the site is shown. So one of the other things that we've asked for, so that we can get a better idea of what this profile looks like from you know, where this guy is pulling into his driveway, what's the elevation here compared to the elevation here and here, and where the building is going to be placed. That's important when you have industrial abutting residential. Yes, we have a little bit of a buffer here from this water tower driveway, but there's nothing in there that's going to stop any sound or sight from the building that is proposed here. So I've asked for a buffer profile. I had to hand draw a picture. I hope you guys appreciate that, because I couldn't find the perfect one. So I'm not very good at drawing cars, but I'm not an architect. So this is what we're looking for. We want to see the, you know, a two-dimensional side profile showing the elevations of where the existing residential is, elevation of a proposed berm with plantings. What is this area profile going to look like? And so basically, I think these items are manageable at this point versus the at the last meeting that we had these guys here. And so this time around, I'm going to be asking that the planning commission decide whether or not they feel comfortable with staff handling revised landscaping plans and not necessarily just the landscaping plan, but the buffer itself. What is that buffer going to look like? And if the planning commission is comfortable with staff reviewing and approving that piece, that could be a condition of approval of the PASP. If the planning commission is not comfortable and would like to better understand what this buffer and this profile is going to look like, I've also suggested the option of the planning commission approving the PASP subject to planning commission review of a revised landscape plan that shows the buffer. Or they also have the choice to table any action. I'm not necessarily recommending that the planning commission table tonight's item, but that option is always out there. And so if the planning commission decides not to table and they want to choose one of A or B in terms of approving the PASP subject to further review of the plan of the landscape plan, either by staff or the planning commission, I'm recommending that it be also subject to the following conditions. The applicant shall work with the city engineer to address all items noted in his report dated 3/11/2021. And the applicant shall address all the other items as listed in number 3, detailed in my staff report, prior to submitting an application for final area site plan review. And number 3, the applicant shall revise the permitted uses noted on sheet C 2.0 to reflect the above language in number 1, which is what I described earlier, uses prior to submitting an application for final area site plan review. And that's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Tricia. Commissioners, any comments or questions for Tricia at this point?
Well, I think, I agree with what you said. I like that verb. Are those pictures drawn to scale at all?
I tried my best.
But that's a fairly high building too. We talked about that before, didn't we?
Yeah.
And it's right next to people's houses and stuff. Yeah, I'm in favor of what you're saying. I can go along with either one of those plans. I think you're on the right track, Tricia.
All right, any other comments at this point? Okay, we'll turn it over to Scott Connors, city engineer.
I think from an engineering standpoint, there were 2 items that you wanted to have some more discussion on before you approve the PASP, or at least consider that. First was the truck turning templates and making sure that those are contained on site. And the other was drainage. So related to the truck turning templates, they are now all shown for all the truck docks. If you look at the southwesternmost truck dock, there are movements there that appear to use the driveway and the public road out front as part of their turning and backing movements. You know, that's something that we really try to avoid with new construction. You know, there's a few of those around the city that where it takes place now, and what it does is it blocks traffic, gets people a little bit angry and antsy. So in a new area like this, we want to avoid that. So I think in this case, there's a real easy fix, and that would be that I would move that southern driveway a little farther south and line it up with the parking aisle on the south side of Phase 2's building. I think that removes that temptation, and if they can make the center truck docks work without going out into the right of way, they can certainly make that movement there work as well. So I would recommend that as an easy fix. And then second is related to drainage. The developer has eliminated the retention pond, which would hold back all the water and count on infiltration. And they have a little bit of a more traditional detention system now. So up in this part of the city is our most strict stormwater zone, Zone A, where they're required to do pretty extensive capture of the water and holding it back. So I think what they're proposing right now is that they would mimic the existing watershed where, let's say, a quarter or a third of the water would go to the northeast up the 4 Mile Road. And then the rest of that would go to the southeast across the water tank site. That water would leave at a very reduced rate. Without getting into all the details, I can assure you that there's 2 different stages, and it would be a little bit less than what you'd see today, even with an undeveloped site. So that's a good thing. But the rate goes for a longer period of time. So one of the things that we're trying to do is confirm that there's capacity in Hendershot for that larger pond at the south end, so that the low flow outlet could go to the street and to the Northridge East system versus being outletted cross country. Because I think that makes a big difference when you concentrate flow on a pipe, if you can just get to the street. So we're working on that. If that can't work, then they would be proposing what's shown on the plan, which is just let it go to the southeast at a reduced rate. Andrew may wish to speak to that a little bit more, but they are allowed to do that. It's just not the most desirable, so we would prefer to put that in a header shot. And again, we're trying to help and do everything we can to make that a smooth process. That's it.
Thank you, Scott. Any comments or questions for Scott? Scott, with respect to the drainage that you described there, are you at a point where working out the details as part of that final area site plan review?
Yeah, I think it wouldn't be fair for me to ask for every detail right now because things are changing. When we get to the final area site plan, if we get that far, then we would want all those details. And they would still have to come in and get the stormwater permit, which is where really the final detail is. But I think at that point, we want to be able to tell you with some assurance what direction the water was going. And we have we've traded some emails back and forth with some pictures of contours and downstream water courses and things. But there's a little bit of work to do, I think, at the final area site plan stage to make that all happen.
All right. Now I invite the applicant to come forward and if you have any additional comments to offer.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman and Planning Commission. Thank you. Thank you, Tricia and Scott, for your reports. I guess I'd like to introduce Rich Deal at this time. He's General Counsel for Great Lakes Capital, filling in for Jeff Smoke that had a prior commitment, so he wasn't able to make it tonight. Rich is a partner with Great Lakes Capital as well, so he'll be able to address any questions relating to the ownership side or development side. It looks like Mr. Grover's also on the line, so if you have any questions for him as well, we'll be happy to answer those. As you can see, we went back to the drawing board after the last meeting and addressed many of these concerns. I apologize. I did not realize that we were asked for a profile running east to west of that residence. Otherwise, we would have happily provided that. I don't know if you're able to pull up the plans, but the grading plan does show that, and I could share my screen as well. But it's kind of an odd situation because the northeast corner of our site is about 798, which is about 10 feet lower than our proposed finished floor. But then as you drive south back to the water tower, it climbs up the hill, going down that road, gets to be about level with our building, and then tapers back down once you get further south. The residence to the east is about, and I'm taking these off from the GIS, but it's about 800, which is roughly, it's about 802, 801, 802, which is about 6 to 7 feet below our proposed finished floor. And we're trying to get that finished floor down a little bit to help with the earthwork. So I don't want to get hung up on the building elevation at this point, because we're still trying to lower that to assist with the earthwork calcs. We did provide the truck turning templates, as you probably saw in your packets, and we feel pretty comfortable with those. There is the one down at the southwest corner that we got a little carried away with, extending out onto the street. or just within the right of way, but I'm confident that they can make that maneuver by heading south and then backing in. But we have no problem working with Scott on placing that drive at the ideal location. And I'm not quite sure, it was referred to as a 360-degree maneuvering. If that's referencing driving around the building, we will not be doing that. We don't want the trucks driving around the building because that's a parking area, and they will not be allowed to drive around the northeast corner of the building. So all of our truck traffic will be in those dock areas, both on the west, and then in the future, if that future expansion were to happen, then it would be on the southwest and the southeast. I think those are the kind of the easy ones, but addressing the concerns with the berm. So we had shown about a 3 to 4 foot berm on the last plan that was submitted. And going back through, it seems like that caused a lot of concern. And so going back through the ordinance and looking at that and trying to address the more so of the landscape quantity and kind of that quality aspect of the buffer that's intended for the type C buffer between industrial and residential. We went back to the 20 feet and that 20-foot width and really focused on that. And it was my understanding at the last meeting, and I apologize if I misunderstood that, but we were to take that full type C quantity back to the rear property line of the residence, and then from there, being that it was the water tower, the city water tower, as well as the consumer substation that's planned to go in at our southeast corner. It was our understanding that that would be kind of lax back there, but we're certainly happy to provide that additional screening. I understand the concerns about future development of that 30 acres, but that would be quite a feat to pull off to assemble all those properties over there. And then, there is substantial vegetation and grade change over there. So there would be some mass earthwork and clear cutting adjacent to the east side of the water tower. And then, if I was a resident back there, I would be more concerned with the water tower and with the substation. So we're happy to work with staff and come up with a good plan. But I think to provide a 6 foot tall buffer in there is unachievable without losing about 60 feet of our property to be able to meet existing grades, to come up that 6 feet at a reasonable slope and then have a plateau and then come back down. That's pretty substantial. So I would ask that you consider our 20-foot buffer along the east side per ordinance, similar to what a couple of the adjacent developments have done when they're abutting the AA zoning in their industrial. So I ask that you keep that in mind. We feel that the 20-foot buffer with the required landscaping would be sufficient. The other item, and maybe Rich would like to address this more, was we had provided the prohibited uses on our site plan as requested at the last meeting. And then we received this new comment about placing the note restricting the uses even further, or at least I shouldn't say that, not restricting them, but asking the applicant to come back for any of the permitted uses in the ML district. And I think that the intent of the IPUD is to allow that underlying zoning classification of the ML and permit those uses. We voluntarily, agreed to those restricted uses that we discussed at the last meeting. And so I'd ask that you not require that note, allowing the planning commission to, or forcing the applicant to come back to the planning commission for any of those permitted uses in the ML district. Similar to what you've done on other developments, similar to this. I think Scott touched on his 2 points very well, the truck turning, and we can work with him on those and look at shifting that drive, and then the drainage. We have a couple good options. We're still kind of vetting those out with Scott and the adjacent development, but we had contacted Progressive to talk through that with them on the Hendershot storm, and that could be a viable option. And we would take advantage of that if presented. However, our fallback would be like Scott discussed, and that would be to release our detained water at a permitted rate, which, as he said, would be less than what goes there now in any rain event. And we would accomplish this. It wouldn't be a point discharge. It would be with a level spreader. And we've done many of these to allow that water to spread out versus being a direct discharge. So I think we can work through all that with Scott and his team during the final site plan if we're afforded that opportunity. And we'd be happy to work with staff on the other final items to get this to the next step. I guess I'd like to turn it over to Rich in case he has any additional comments that he'd like to add.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that very much, Andrew. Good evening, members of the commission. Let me first echo Andrew's comments. We greatly appreciate Tricia's and Scott's work and thought and kind of guidance through this preliminary plan process, and kind of their lens through kind of helping ensure that there's kind of protection for development here, as well as accommodating concerns with adjoining owners. As we move forward, I think, as the commission knows, this is a kind of a proposed development project that is intended to be, at first a spec building, so we can move forward on construction, have a ready structure with that shortens the time for potential future tenants to relocate to Walker, to make it an attractive site, an expedient site. And with that, the one concern we have, and I just wanted to clarify one point Andrew made on the zoning aspect, is similar to the property next door, the Amazon site. That's as you know, it's an IPUD. That's I think its uses are simply any light industrial. And generally, I think the IPUDs use that ML or light industrial platform for permitted uses. And we'd like to have your consideration to use the light industrial of the permitted uses in that as a base, and then exclude out, as discussed last time, exclude out those items that are of concern that would be excluded from this area, because having a spec site and investing multi-millions of dollars, have a building where we aren't sure whether one of the listed uses would ever be permitted is a challenge. And so I wanted to clarify two things, though. One is that I certainly am in full support of Tricia's recommendation regarding the performance standards. That's one aspect of protection that would remain in place as to noise, light, et cetera, regardless of the use that would be in the building. But I'd like the commission's consideration for the permitted uses here to be what would be light industrial, subject to exclusions that were discussed last time and identified, together with any other, additional exclusions from the limited list of permitted uses already that would be of concern. And I think with that, greatly appreciate your consideration to help support this moving forward, and we'll take your guidance too on the landscaping, and we're happy to work with staff to come up with a plan, as Andrew mentioned, unless the commission would like to also, review the landscape as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for the applicant at this point concerning this? Stephen?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. With regard to the exclusionary language that we're talking about here, I understand your issue with not wanting to have any light industrial use have to come back to the planning commission level. That makes perfect sense to me, but I also understand our sensitivity to not giving a natural by right permission to what could be a more intense use than maybe what we're hoping to have on this site, with the proximity that could potentially have to some residential properties. So I'm wondering if there's a way we could maybe add something, that list that we've developed together already, and maybe add some language that says some or other styles of development that could be similarly burdensome to neighboring residential properties. So just to give some intent language to it, so it's not necessarily every use, but it's uses that are similar to like a kennel or whatever other items we've included in that list. Could that be a way to kind of compromise that, so we can give some discretion to say, if there's something that's a little bit that's similar to these types of uses that we didn't maybe foresee, could we give that an opportunity to have some additional review, but maybe not every use? I guess I'm just spitballing here and looking for some feedback on that.
May I, Mr. Chair? I just wanted to add that, just wanted to clarify that my recommendation to revise this to allow uses permitted in the light industrial district. I'm not suggesting that every use go before the planning commission for a use review. It's only ones that are maybe some oddball use. Maybe it's like a, indoor dirt bike thing. It's not listed in the light industrial district. So when I said that we can't possibly name all the uses that could, appropriately fit a light industrial area or building, that's why I said, hey, the permitted uses are all the uses that are permitted in the light industrial district without restriction, unless there is something that is questionable in terms of compatibility. And
so maybe to that end, we could find a way to clarify the intent that could, I guess, help clear those waters a little bit. I don't know. Again, I'm just thinking out loud here.
Yeah, Mr. Gilbert and Tricia, I don't have a problem with that aspect. If that could meet the desire, that does meet our need too. I guess the way I had looked at it is, if the IPUD had as a platform the ML district, there's specific, there's the specific list of what's permitted, and unless you fit in one of those boxes, we'd have to come and have a special exception. The 5 items that were in those boxes that were going to be excluded, regardless of whether they were in the ML district, were the ones that were identified. But I think that I think we'd certainly be supportive of trying to find that balance. And if Tricia is if the thought is that anything in this ML kind of zoning classification except for those 5 or 6 things that are in there, like the kennel, the mini storage, fuel filling, any of those, regardless of whether they're in the ML, those would be outright excluded. And if it were items that had, similar concerns to those, we'd certainly, want to, certainly, welcome the Plan Commission, but that would provide at least clarity kind of going in. There is a set of, a set of uses that, are permitted, and it wouldn't be, for any change in tenant or any, kind of reduce the risk on investment on the front end too, that there's at least a path for the building to be occupied.
Yeah, I think that's a good point with the spec building. It's geared towards an expedited delivery, and if we have to come back before the planning commission, then that might be, that might be a delay for a potential tenant. And I don't know, maybe the city has some draft language. I don't know if that previous, the previous project to ours tonight, that I think they had residential on 3 sides. I don't know if there was something similar to this that was drafted for them that we could potentially look at. But I think that's kind of, I guess you can kind of see our goal, and then we see your goal, that you want to be sensitive to what goes in there. So if we could come to some understanding, that would be most helpful. And I think we could work with staff on that if Planning Commission would support that.
Mr. Chair, I'm having a little bit of problem with this, because if either we allow it in the light industrial zoning district or don't, we have the ordinances written so that we follow those ordinances. I understand we don't want, well, I don't even understand we don't want certain things there. If they follow the Article 15 performance standards for sound, vibration, odor, gases, glare, and so forth, and it's in the light industrial permitted use, why would we restrict it?
Because you have the discretion to do that. You have the authority to do that because it's.
I understand, but I'm not seeing very specific things that say why we should do it.
The reason why, the whole reason why I'm suggesting that we put something in here for uses that could be prohibited is because it borders residential uses.
I understand that. And I think we look at that, and it could be brought to the Planning Commission's, how do I say it? As things come forward, we trust you guys to go over them and say, oh, this doesn't fit or this does fit.
And that's why I said with the planning director's discretion, sending some things to the planning commission if it's like, I don't know.
So then we shouldn't even build this building because it's next to residential. I've always said that all along. I'm having a problem. If we're going to allow it, we're going to allow it or not. Either we allow the light industrial to go up against residential, and we write the code to say it can go against light industrial, but these things can't be in there, or we allow it. It's one or the other, or we disallow it. I don't want this to be a tightrope walk all the time. And we've done it several times up against residential. And I don't remember putting in restrictions like this.
Well, just to give you an example of where frustration can come in when you have some weird oddball use 20 years down the line, got a PUD that was approved 20 years ago in the past, and there's nothing in there in terms of what kind of uses are allowed. So if we get these uses nailed down now, then we can prevent any severely incompatible uses that would be acceptable on your typical light industrial zone piece of property. But the beauty of the PUD is that the applicant gets a little bit more flexibility and the city gets a little bit more control in being able to limit some of those uses that are just not gonna be.
If a developer or a tenant wants to come and say, the use isn't in here, but this is what I want to do, then it is the discretion of the planning director to take it wherever they want. If the use is not in there, it can go before the ZBA and be judged similar. It could be taken to us and said, hey, this use, whatever the bizarre use is, they want to put it in here, how do you feel about it? If it's not in here, it can't be approved.
So the ZBA doesn't have jurisdiction over planned unit developments.
Well, then it would have to come to the planning commission. If it's not in there, you can't approve it just by saying, oh yeah, let's just do it. If it's not in there, if it's I don't even know what to say, what it would be, because I can't imagine.
And that's why there's so many different possibilities for like industrial uses. And you never know what's gonna pop up. You never know what is going to be a trend.
Right.
And, when I worked for Plainfield Township, we allowed for breweries in the light industrial district. Is a brewery going to be a use that is compatible right next to residential?
Well, we did it over on Remembrance Road, but that's being specific. What I'm saying is, if it's not in here, how do you approve it?
Well, that's why I'm asking for the planning commission to allow staff the discretion to decide if something should have to go to the planning commission.
That's already, I believe that's already your job. If it's not in here, and you can't point to something and say, it says right here they can do it. If it's not in here, what do? It's already part of the job of the city to say, oh, it's not in there, we gotta figure out if we can and what we can, blah, blah, blah. I don't know that putting language in there saying just that, if it's not in there, if the planning director has the discretion to do this, it's already implicated as you do have that discretion.
I guess I'm not quite understanding, because we don't have a process that requires applicants to go to the planning commission for a use review always, unless it's part of like a final area site plan.
Okay. Charlie's raised some good points as far as,
I don't know how, I'm trying to put it.
I get what you're saying.
It's modeled in my mind, I'm sorry.
Yes, I totally get what you're saying. The
well,
PUD, it's an industrial PUD. We should be able to allow industrial uses. But we do have a responsibility to be sensitive to the residential land uses that are adjacent.
well, I think the common ground here that we might be able to work from is performance standards. If you've got a use that, if it's in the list under ML, that's pretty cut and dry. If you're looking at ones where they might come outside of that, outside of the lines, that's where the performance standards could be used to really give you a good indicator. This is really pushing the limits there. And under that circumstance, then it would be going to the planning commission.
I'm telling you, you have more power than you think you do, is really what I'm telling you.
Hey,
Ultimately, the planning commission has the authority to restrict uses. I only make a recommendation.
Well, yeah, of course, but.
I would just kind of wanted to clarify that a little bit, Tyler. Are you saying that you're fine with having it listed as an ML use, and then the 5 items that are on there, those are restricted items, and then just leave it at that, knowing that if staff wanted to, they could always kick it back to the planning commission if they felt that they were uncomfortable with the use that's different than the ML or slightly off from it?
Yeah, I don't know how to say it. I guess.
Because I guess that's where I sit on it, is I'm looking at it more from, I'm okay with it as long as it fits within an ML industrial use, with the 5 restrictions that the applicant has also said that they would be willing to do, and then kind of leave it at that, knowing that if the staff felt that it wasn't quite meeting one of those ML situations, they could always send it to the planning commission saying they're uncomfortable and we need the planning commission to help make that decision.
I agree with Jason.
I would agree with that if in any situation, we think that that's the proper route.
Yeah, so for me, I don't think we need to go any further into it. I think if most of us are comfortable with the ML designation, you know, with the 5 restrictions that were put on there, it sounds like the applicant was fine with that too. I think we could move forward from there.
Well, I also don't want to restrict staff from saying, oh, it's.
Yeah, and I don't think you ever restrict the staff from that. I think they always have that option to turn around and say, we're uncomfortable making this decision. Let's kick it.
I'm fine with that.
They have an obligation to bring it to us if they're uncomfortable.
Yeah, so I don't think that they can, if they wanted to, in any case, even if it specifically meets the ML, they could turn around and say, I don't like this one. I'm uncomfortable making this decision. That's why we have a planning commission for it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think they have that power or that authority to do that, so.
Stephen, you want to offer additional comment?
Yeah, I guess the only insight from my perspective that I do see this as a little bit different situation when you're working with a spec building versus typically when we're reviewing things. We know that we have at least some idea of who the primary business that's going to be occupying the building is. Where this feels a little bit different because of the nature of it. But I think I'm pretty good with where we're at, and with the PASP, I'm comfortable where we're at.
If the building was facing to the east, but the primary activity is going to be on the west side, I'm okay with what's proposed.
I have a couple of comments also, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I guess in general, I'm in favor of what Tricia was asking for initially with having a type C buffer along the east side. I think that takes care of it. As long as, from my side of things, if staff were doing that, you know, conversations with the applicant and it meets the type C buffer when it comes for a final area site plan, then we would know exactly what we're going to see. So I'm comfortable with that side of it. One comment, and this is kind of splitting hairs with Scott. I saw where he drew that in as the entrance. For me, I might split that in half so that way a truck comes in, the headlights of the truck are coming in and they hit the building side rather than down the drive aisle. But that, I'm okay either way. It was just a comment that I thought I would bring up if that were something that wanted to be considered. I think with the turning template, it's good to move the drive access just to the south there, so that way we discourage anybody from trying to go out on the road, but moving it just a little closer towards the north might help with the headlights coming in and out of there. So just a couple comments on that from you. But otherwise, I think I'm genuinely in favor of this.
Okay. I'm going to take at this point, this is not a public hearing, but we may have people either online or in the audience here that would like to offer comment on that. So make that opportunity available right now. You could come forward and give your name and address, please.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Ken Vanderhart. I am the neighbor at 3074, right next to the building going in. It's disappointing to see industrial going in right next to your home, but I know we can't stop progress. But I do implore you to keep them to the highest possible standard of a screen between the two buildings. I do have some concerns with the lighting on the east side of the building. We are already kind of inundated with light once the water tower went in and all the trees and everything came down. We get a lot of bright lights from the buildings that are quite far south of us, but they're very bright. And the water issue. I already have water issues with my driveway and the front of my property. So anything going to the northeast side of the property, I would like to have them look at very closely. Every time it rains, the water comes down 4 Mile, and I know this is probably more of a county issue, but the rain comes down 4 Mile, comes across the driveway for the water tower into my yard, and it puddles in my driveway, sometimes several inches deep. So just a couple of issues. I mean, there's many issues that I'm worried about, but that's just a few that I'd like to raise. So thank you.
Thank you. We have Dennis Higgins. Dennis?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep. Yes.
Hi, I appreciate the sensitivity of the commission and the staff to the residential areas, and particularly Ms. Anderson's observation about the housing market being so crazy in this area. So my question is, are there particular stipulations that are measured as far as noise, the duration of which, and the hours that certain levels of noise are permitted?
So, hi Dennis.
Hi.
So we do have a noise ordinance, and I want to say the hours, the typical hours of operation are like 7:30 a.m. to 10 or 11 p.m. This came up when we were talking about the outdoor restaurant seating and when that should end. I just remember it being, we ended up wanting to be consistent with what the noise ordinance says. So the noise one is sometimes a little bit hard to enforce because typically the noise is happening during times where people are home, they're trying to sleep in, or you know, it's not during regular business hours where our code enforcement specialists could drive out and go, yeah, that's pretty loud. So there are some limitations with enforcement on that, but yeah, I would have to have the ordinance in front of me to tell you exactly what those hours of operation are.
I appreciate that. Noise is a very subjective thing, and I was just curious if there's a parameter that was measured specifically.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it indicates a decibel level, but again, as far as I know, our code enforcement specialist does not have like a decibel meter that she goes out and measures sound with. So, you know, I think it might need some revisions. But like I said, it's a little bit hard to enforce.
I appreciate everybody's work on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Any other comments, Jason?
No.
Okay. Let's go back to our deliberations. We've got a recommendation from staff. We've had some conversation about some of the provisions pertaining to that. We've got opportunities in terms of the drainage and the landscaping, whether or not we ask that staff work that through with the applicant, or whether in any circumstance we want to have that come back to the planning commission. And the use allowances, we've had some pretty good discussion on that. We've got a list of particular uses that have been outlined. We've talked about the ML, and if we've got something that's a little bit off from a stated allowance and how that could be addressed. So what's your pleasure?
My comments are, I think they've come a long ways. I trust staff to go over the review of landscape buffer and such, but if they come into a deadlock that they can't agree, it has to come back to us. They need, our staff needs that opportunity. Because we can't, if it has to be decided by one person and they can't agree, that it should come back to us. Other than that, I'll say I don't like industrial against residential. I have plenty of experience with that where our building isn't. The neighbors griping at us about things that we were there first. So it happens. That's just my opinion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may. On the landscape buffer question, I would just ask for clarification. I think Mr. Nihus had suggested that he was fine with the 20-foot type C buffer. And it sounded like Mr. Corfidge is, if I said it right again, it sounded like the same, but I guess I'd like some direction from the planning commission members tonight. Because staff recommendation is for a 6-foot berm there. However, the requirement is for a 20-foot type C buffer yard, which we've shown up to that southerly point, if you will, which we would be happy to extend it down, past the water tower. So if we could just have clarification from the board tonight on that, I would greatly appreciate that.
Well, Mr. Chair, I don't know that we can clarify that. If we give permission for you to work it out with staff, there's got to be some give and take. Otherwise we'll just say we approve it as staff recommends. So it's kind of in between you and staff on how to handle it. I'll go with the staff recommendation. So if we have to have a hard and fast answer tonight, that's what I'm going to do.
The biggest difference I saw in the plans is that there's still quite a few trees and shrubs missing. So I could agree with the 20-foot, but there's still like, I don't know, 40 to 50 trees and shrubs missing on that east side. So again, it's between staff and the developer, but you still got to come close to the amount of trees and shrubs.
Well, that was one of the directions where I was going with that, is to allow staff to review and kind of go forward with that, with the recommendation from us of providing a minimum of the type C buffer. I'm not opposed to a 6-foot berm, along with that, just to try to be extra protective here. But that's where I agree with Tyler that staff can have some discretion on that. It would just be my intention to make sure that we get the minimum of the type C buffer with some sort of berming potentially in there as it works. There has to be a little give and take there.
Thank you. That's what I was kind of looking for. We had agreed to the 20-foot buffer in meeting all those requirements down to the south property line. But as I mentioned, a berm is going to be awfully tough to get in there. And Jason, you probably know as much or maybe as more as anybody, but it's going to be really hard to get that 6-foot berm in there with the grade change. So we're probably going to be looking at, a 60-foot setback there to be able to get a 6-foot berm in there. But we can certainly work with staff and come up with a plan that's amenable to everyone.
Well, remember, that's me saying that. That's not the rest of the commissioners. You got to get them on board too.
Well, and that's where we have a final motion in front of us, and I think option 2 leans more toward with respect to the landscaping for the developer to work with planning staff on the detail of that aspect of the project.
Are you looking for a motion, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I can make a motion. I make a motion to approve the PASP for Great Lakes Capital proposed for a 3174 4-mile road northwest for the plan's last revision dated 3/5/21. Based on the following findings and subject to the following conditions. The proposed development does conform to the city's general development plan or any part thereof. The proposed development does conform to the intent and all the regulations, standards of this article and this chapter as applicable. The proposed development will be adequately served by public facilities and services such as highways, streets, police, fire protection, drainage courses, water and sewer and water facilities, refuse disposal, or that the persons or agencies responsible for the proposed development shall be able to provide in a manner applicable to the planning commission any such facilities and services. Location of the proposed uses, layout of the site, and its relation to streets giving access to it is such that traffic to, from, and within the site and assembly of persons in connection therewith will not be hazardous or inconvenient to the project or the surrounding area. Noise, odor, light, and other external effects from any source whatsoever which is connected with the proposed use will not adversely affect adjacent neighboring lands or uses. Using option number 2, the applicant shall submit revisions related to the landscape buffer on the east property line for review and approval by staff prior to submitting an application for final area site plan review with a recommendation from the commission to have a minimum of a type C buffer on the east side, including in some areas at the staff's discretion, a 6-foot berm. The applicant shall work with the city engineer to address all items noted in his report dated 3/11/2021. The applicant shall address all other items as listed in number 3 in the planning director's report dated 3/8/2021 prior to submitting an application for final area site plan review. The applicant shall revise the permitted uses note on sheet C 2.0 to reflect the direction of the ML zoning district. With the following restricted uses: a kennel, 24-hour mini storage center, fuel filling station, recycling, compost center, or major auto repair.
A motion, is there support?
I support that.
Supported by Tyler. Any questions? We'll move to the vote. Tricia, if you could call roll, please.
Terry,
Yes.
Tyler,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Pat,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much.
And thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, that's part of the agenda. Any other business at this point?
Yeah, we have some ordinance amendments.
Oh, that's correct. I'm sorry.
Sorry to disappoint. I'm gonna try to make this very brief. Because we've been working on this, for a very, very long time. And so we finally got to a point where, we can, the clerk's department and the community development department can agree on, some procedures and ordinance language as it pertains to food trucks. In the current ordinance, and I know that some other amendments have been made, like over the past couple of years, to address food trucks, licensing, and temporary use permits. But we've been finding that the word temporary and temporary use is what we were kind of getting hung up on, because, for example, Lost Art Brewing wants to have a food truck on their site, but they don't, it's not just for one day. They want to have a temporary use permit for like 6 months, every weekend for 6 months. And at that point, we say, well, that's not really temporary. So how can we fashion this ordinance so that we can, still review a plan and an application for this type of use that's not necessarily permanent, but the word temporary doesn't necessarily work. So that we can let this use occur. And it's also a business, and so you guys expressed your concern with removing, the clerks thought it would be easy to just remove the requirement altogether to have food trucks register as a business. But we register businesses in the city for a reason, and so it was important to allow people to keep that requirement in there. And so basically, the amendments as they pertain to food trucks in our temporary use chapter or section, we basically took that temporary use chapter and we changed the whole thing to be uses requiring a zoning permit or zoning permit required. We took the same article and we renamed it zoning permit required. And so a lot of the language in here as it referenced temporary uses, some of them got to stay because there are some temporary uses that we, like a temporary construction building or temporary construction trailer, which in this section is under the uses that do not need that zoning permit. I should add that this whole section is kind of a mess and it really just needs to be overhauled completely. But for the sake of being able to get the provisions in there for food trucks, we just went with it and we changed what we could for now. But there's some other areas that we definitely are going to want to fix. So as it pertains, so I gave you guys the existing language and then also the clean version, because I didn't want Tyler to get confused because of the red line version being too busy. So basically we're allowing food trucks in all zoning districts, and they have specific requirements. One of them being that they have to obtain a license. We didn't necessarily call it a business license because they are making some changes to chapter 22 of the general ordinance that calls them out as a specific type of license, such as like a snowplow license or a waste hauler license. So we only referenced obtaining a license from the clerk's office as it pertains to, I found a typo in here already. This is going to go through review by our attorney before it goes to the city commission. So the zoning permit will be required by the property owner. So for example, Lost Art Brewing, they're the property owner. They get the zoning permit to allow a food truck. They have to submit an application and we route it around through our site plan review committee. Fire, police, DPW, everybody weighs in on whether or not the location of the food truck is going to be okay. It's not blocking any emergency access, or, it's not blocking any ADA spaces, things like that. And then the food truck itself, the business owner is responsible for getting a license from the clerk's office. So they're going to be two separate things. They are no longer tied together. When they get a license to operate in the city of Walker, they're not tied to one location. They'll be able to station their food truck wherever they're invited by a property owner who first obtains a zoning permit. So that in a nutshell is what we've done with the temporary use section of the ordinance. We also took home occupations. And we added a section into the zoning ordinance in this section, zoning permit required. Because previously, or currently, I should say, all the regulatory language for home occupations was located in the definitions section, which is not a good place to have regulatory language. So we wanted to take it out of definitions and give it its own section. And then we also are proposing some changes that would allow customary home occupations such as hair salons and dog groomers, which we've recently had to deny requests for or licenses for because the current ordinance or the current definition, I should say, says that no sales in connection with, or no sales of goods or services in connection with the home occupation shall be permitted on the premises. But, you know, it's well known that people have hair salons in their basement. You know, everybody goes to a lady, everyone knows a lady that does that. And so I went with code enforcement specialists interpretation when we would get these applications, and I'm like, how have you treated this in the past? And she's always said that she doesn't permit it because the ordinance says no sales in connection with the home occupation. So we changed that, and because, you know, basically the purpose of the regulations for home occupations is just to make it so you can, you know, work from home and have your own little like side business at home, but not change any of the actual exterior character of your home. And it shouldn't look any different than any other home in your residential area. We also added some prohibited home occupations. And originally we had in there short-term rentals, but we decided to just take it out altogether because we don't really have an issue in the city of Walker with short-term rentals or like Airbnbs. But at this point in time, we agreed that it would be best to just stay silent on the issue. And that's basically the gist of it. So we've got the temporary use section as it pertains to home occupations and mobile food vendors, food trucks, and then all the other smaller changes and references to the building official and some other outdated language that we've cleaned up a little bit. And then we also have the definition section 94-5, where we've had to modify home occupations, mobile food vendor, and mobile food vending to reflect the amendments that we're proposing in the other section. So you're voting to make a recommendation to the city commission. And I plan on putting this on the agenda for the city commission on April 12th.
Any conversation concerning the description? Before we go any further, we should open the public hearing.
Motion to open public hearing.
Motion by Steve, support by Tyler, to open the public hearing. Anyone opposed to that? Okay, hearing is open. Any public comment, either in person or online?
Nope.
Nope.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Support.
Motion by Tyler, supported by Stephen, to close the public hearing. Anybody that's opposed to that? Okay, it's closed. Discussion.
I'll just say quickly, Mr. Chair, we've been working on these ones for a really long time. I think we finally nailed down some language that covers all of our bases and that everyone departmentally that has to deal with these instances is comfortable with at this point. As Tricia noted, there will be some components that'll have to undergo some further review in those sections, but as far as the pertinent issues, I think we addressed them in a way that at least for the time being, we feel pretty comfortable with, and we're ready to get these taken care of.
Steve? I think that, my opinion is, likewise, that, this is a good changes being made, progress. I understand that you feel it needs more work hereafter, but I think for where we are right now, it looks good.
Mr. Chair, I agree with you, so I will make a motion to forward a favorable recommendation to the City Commission for the approval of the proposed City of Walker zoning ordinance text amendments to Article 18, temporary uses, and Article 1, Section 94-5, definitions and interpretation of terms. I forgot to read the title. Proposed zoning ordinance text amendments, Article 18, temporary uses, and Article 1, Section 94-5, definitions and interpretation of terms.
We have a motion. Support by Scott. Any more conversation? There being none, Tricia, roll call, please.
Terry,
Yes.
Tyler.
Yep.
Steve,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Pat,
Yep.
Mark,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Now, is there any other business?
We have a meeting next week, English Hills.
Is it gonna be, where is it gonna be located?
It's gonna be here. It's gonna be hybrid again. Tonight, the amount of chairs that you see in here, including all of us, equals 25. So like, we might have a hard time. I think Scott mentioned that he was interested in doing crowd control, so. It'll be interesting.
I used to work the door in college, so
Okay,
back in time.
Handle it.
got some experience.
Okay.
I do want to mention one thing on next week's meeting. I probably will run that as a Zoom webinar. So if you want to join remotely, I'll send out a further email, but the one thing I wanted to get out is that everyone that would be on the board joining remotely would have an individual link. So instead of using the link in the packet, that would be for the public, you would have your own link. So that gives, for these much bigger meetings, more control over Zoom bombers in essence. So
Jason, do you have to go to every meeting?
yes.
So I have an interesting story, if you'll indulge me for 2 minutes on this. I had a planning commission meeting and a zoning commission meeting on Monday. Ironically, I was in front of Terry on one of them. Fortunately, I didn't have to speak too much on that. But my first meeting, which was a planning commission meeting, I was first on the agenda. And they did it remote, and they had half the meeting done prior to actually turning on the actual remote, so I didn't get to present. They did approve my case without me even knowing it, which was nice. And of course, I did get approved on Terry's too. But one of the things I was going to mention on that is, Jason, thank you. You've done a great job kind of hosting these things, because I've been on several of them, and these go smoother than most. So thanks for that.
I appreciate you saying that. No problem. Don't mind doing it.
I did text Jason, the commission audio is echoey and garbly. I have the volume all the way up here, and I really have to struggle at times to hear what's being said in the commission chambers.
Yeah, it'd be nice if there was a microphone that was by the kind of stand where they're presenting. That does get a little tricky, and it would be nice if there was a camera looking that way, just so we could see, you know, who's doing the presentation. But I think from small logistics standpoints, we're getting by better than most. I can tell you that, because there are some that are pretty tough to do that. But yeah, I know what you mean by the sound. It does get a little tricky sometimes.
And the quickly on that, so essentially the system that was in here was never made for like the Zoom. So I had to cobble a lot together. I I would like to have an actual system in here, but part of what I was waiting for is to see if this was something that was gonna be permanent forever, or if it's gonna be done in a month, you know, there's a lot of money to spend to try to, so that's what, so I'm trying
Just
to,
one more month has gone on for a year.
yeah, true.
And I will say there may be an infusion of federal funds, and my guess is that if they're tied to COVID expenditures, upgrading our meeting systems would probably qualify, so.
That's a good point too.
Yep, just keep them printing presses churning more bills.
Don't get me started, Tom.
I hear all this. Oh, but we're getting free money. Okay, I'm off. I'm out.
So next week's meeting, do planning commissioners get first dibs, or is it first come, first serve of the 25 people?
I mean, it's whatever. I mean, we're not gonna turn planning commissioners away.
Okay, because I mean, I can come in, but I mean, if all of a sudden we got a full house, then might as well just stay home.
And if somebody beats you to your seat, you lose it.
Yeah, we may have to, you know, put a sign on the door saying that the capacity is only 25. And then, we talked about having,
We'll just
someone-
put on the door how many people can come in.
Yeah.
Subtract us out, so 25 minus whoever's gonna be here.
No, it's 25 total.
I know, so then you can say there's 17 people allowed in here besides
Oh, yeah.
the planning commission.
Mm-hmm.
Well, keep in mind that even though the folks that live in the condos next door seem pretty agreeable to what's going on, they've been communicated with, a lot of them still might show up because it's the first real official time to hear it. So it could be a big group outside.
And we got a letter from, I'm pretty sure I forwarded that letter from the condo president. So they have some concerns, and we realized that there's a part in our master plan that that made it through into the plan that was adopted that we didn't mean to keep in there. So there's like the English Hills framework where it's all detailed on one page, and then on the next page, it's the old, what it said before, and we meant to take that thing out. And so this letter that we received, I think is referencing that section. So it'll become apparent when I get my packet out to you guys, hopefully tomorrow.
Okay. Good.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned, meeting adjourned, thank you.